Hi, I'm Ashley Cooley, a birth, baby, and sleep specialist and mom of 3. There's so much information out there, right? This show is dedicated to helping you clear out the noise so you can figure out what will work best for your baby and your family. If you're looking to learn more about your baby, gain more confidence in your parenting, and get as much sleep as you can through it all, you've come to the right place. Bringing up baby is about to get a little easier. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bringing Up Baby podcast. My name is Ashley Cooley and I'm host of the show and owner of Birth Baby Sleep. And I'm excited to bring you this episode. It's been a minute. We usually take a little break over the summer and it is still summer, but we're kind of doing things a little bit differently around here now. And when we've got a topic, an episode to bring you, why wait? Why do we have to be on a certain schedule? So you know what? We're just going to bring it to you when it comes up. So today, I have for you a conversation that I was able to have very recently with Shandelle Ferguson of Blossom and Birth Doula. She's a birth and postpartum doula here in Halifax. And I asked her to come on the show to chat with me about formula, about infant formula. It's, something that I think just assume people know about if you're choosing not to breastfeed or if you can't breastfeed. Well, here's the substitute. Here you go. Not a whole lot of information that gets exchanged after that sometimes. And so while we're talking about in this episode the different types of formula, how to safely prepare formula, giving some resources here, so definitely check out the show notes for this episode. Well, we're also talking about the impacts on our mental health, of whether we are choosing to give our babies formula or if we feel like we have to give our babies formula for whatever reason. So that can have an impact on our mental health. So ultimately, we hope you get something out of this episode. This is also going to be, one of those resources that I'm going to continuously refer to in my prenatal classes, in our feeding class. We do talk a lot about breastfeeding, and in the past, full disclosure, it has been an exclusively breastfeeding class. And while I understand and appreciate the need to have classes like that, I kind of over the years have been morphing this breastfeeding class into a feeding class, talking more about bottle feeding or pumping, mentioning some things about formula, but until recently, haven't been diving into this topic much myself. So forgive me for this long overdue episode. Here's Shandelle, and here's our conversation around infant formula. Hi, Shandelle. Nice to see you. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, happy to be here.
Yay, good. Shandelle, we've met a few times. We've worked together a few times. I'm excited to chat with you. There's so many things we could chat about because you have so many wonderful skills and knowledge. But today we are going to be talking about formula, and I'm pumped to get into this conversation because we do get a lot of questions around formula. I shared with you that I personally have never purchased formula. I've never actually mixed a bottle of formula before. While I have information and knowledge around it, I really wanted to talk to somebody that I know is in homes with parents, with a lot of new parents, and figuring out the feedings and working with both breastfeeding, formula feeding, bottle feeding, all the things. So I was hoping that that's what we could chat about today. But before we dive into all of that, could you share with us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. So I am a mom to 3, and I have mixed formula for my babies. I was one of those people who decided to do a mix of breast and bottle feeding. And so I've got experience there, but I'm also a birth and postpartum doula and lactation counselor. And as a lactation counselor, it may seem weird that I'm, chatting about formula, but I really see myself as like a feeding counselor, not just breastfeeding. So that's kind of a little bit about me. My passion is about education and supporting families. That, a lot of times comes with choosing formula or talking about formula and feeding and all that looks like. So, yeah.
I find we tend to focus a lot. I know prenatally in our classes, we have a feeding class while we talk a lot about breastfeeding and breast milk because there's a lot of unknowns there, and it's important to share that information. It's also very interesting to me that there's a lack of communication or information around formula. And it's not just as simple as like, we have a bottle, we give it to the baby. We have to prep that formula. We need to make sure it's safe. So what are you finding when you're in homes with parents, new parents, or somebody that's maybe never used formula? Like, is there some confusion around that, the information that they're getting, or how amounts, like what are you finding are like the questions or concerns that parents are having when it comes to giving their little ones formula?
I think there's a few things. The amounts is a big one because they're, at the hospital, let's say they have to top up because their breast milk isn't in yet, or maybe baby's losing too much weight. Which is another thing all in itself. But the hospital just says, "Yep, okay, here, give your baby 15 mils," and then they go home, and it's like, okay, well, my baby still seems hungry. How much am I supposed to give them? And what's the cap? And when do I go up? And those kinds of things. So they're not
Hmm.
really given those kind of that kind of information.
Right.
So that's a big question, because I think the hospital is very focused on breastfeeding and how much your baby should be feeding and for how long. And so they're not given any resources then when they go home about, when to increase your milliliters for formula and those kinds of things.
Mm.
Um, the other thing that I find people go home with the lack of knowledge around the different types of formula. So at the hospital, if you have to give formula, they have those pre-mixed, ready to feed little tiny bottles. And it's the same brand. And so they go home and think, okay, well, if I have to buy more of this, this is the type that I need to feed my baby, this brand, this ready to feed, this size bottle. And they don't know that there's other brands, that there's other types of formula, that there's, a concentrate that you add water, that most people are able to go right into powdered formula, which is cheaper. And so they don't have that knowledge around what that looks like. And we're in a formula shortage right now. And so, people are going out trying to scour shelves of grocery stores and things like that for these little ready to feed bottles, but they don't realize that like that's not the only thing that they can buy.
Yeah.
So there's some just lack of communication around what the next steps are after you go home with feeding your baby if you're using formula.
Such a good point that whatever is provided at the hospital, that company has a contract with the hospital. Lucky them, because that's the
Yeah,
kind of thing that happens is they go home, oh, I need to get this. I'm going to get this exact same thing. But like you said, there's different types, there's different price points. There's
yeah.
so many factors that go into choosing the formula that they're going to use. And like you said, there's a shortage. So it's gotten a little better since that all started, but it's still something to consider. So
Mhm.
what if let's just take a minute to break down the different types and like kinds of formula that's out there. Obviously there's
Yep,
lots of different brands. Most formula that we're going to for healthy babies, basically the cow's milk based formulas, of which there are different kinds, but there's the ready to feed formula, which is
yep,
like you said, what most newborns or new infants are getting, particularly at the hospital. But also it's just a lot easier. You just take off the top and you give them, it's ready to go. There's no mixing.
yep,
There's the concentrate, which is like a 1-to-1 ratio, I believe, with mixing. So it's a little bit different, but a little bit cheaper. And then there's the powdered formula, which is known as the cheaper kind, but it's
yep.
not necessarily safe for all babies, right? And there are some parameters around that. Could you talk a bit to that?
Yeah. Yeah. So the ready to feed, like you said, it's great. Especially at the hospital, they just give you a disposable nipple, which also has a little bit of a lot of people don't know that they're disposable. So people are like sterilizing those little nipples and reusing them again, but they're only meant to be one-time use.
Mm,
So when you go home, you don't realize that you're still reusing the same nipples. But those are great because, like you said, it's ready to feed. However, the downside to that is that you're using these bottles and it's very easy for the milk to just drop into baby's mouth then even when they're not sucking, which can cause gas, overfeeding, those kinds of things. So
mm,
pros and cons.
mm-hmm.
Um, the ready to feed, like you said, it's a 1-to-1 ratio, and cheaper, because it's not ready to feed. But they usually come in like bigger containers. Some of them are in cans as well. So you do have to, like, when you open those up, pour them into a different container, or get your bottles ready and just stick them in the fridge because they can't stay in the can once it's opened.
Yeah.
And you need pre-boiled water. And so that's the other thing is, like, if you're on a well and septic, make sure that your well and septic is kind of tested to make sure that there's no bacteria in your water, those kinds of things. If you're using city water, then, it should be safe, and just use pre-boiled, cooled temperature water. Um, and when we think about cooled water to be using with either powder or concentrate, it's good on the counter once you've boiled it for a few days, 3 days. So just in, like, mason jars or big water bottles. So you can, like,
This is just the
pre-boil
water itself, not mixed with the
just the water
formula
itself.
yet. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So just the water itself, pre-boil like a huge pot of it, save yourself some time, and then stick it in some, like, bigger water bottles or mason jars or something like that. So that's some time saving things. And then the powdered formula, it's changed in the last year or so in that as long as your baby is not preterm, as long as they are not immune compromised and they're not low weight gain, you can use powdered formula with your baby.
Right from the
Um,
jump, right?
right from the jump.
Yeah.
It's just a bit of a pain in the butt, because you have to, again, pre-boil your water, and get it down to a room temperature or body temperature, and then pour in the formula. So some people pour in the formula first, then add the water, but it gets really clumpy. So do the water first, then add the powder in, give it a really good shake to kind of mix it up. All containers, no matter what kind of formula you buy, will have instructions on the back, which will let you know kind of how much to use and all those kinds of things. But once kind of either the concentrate or the formula is mixed, it's only good for 2 hours once it's mixed. So you want to make sure that you're not kind of getting them ready too much far in advance.
Is this at room temperature, or can you mix them and put it in the fridge for any longer?
So you can mix them and put them in the fridge, but it's only good for 24 hours. Once it's on the counter, only good for 2 hours.
Okay, because I do
Yeah.
know a lot of people will do this pitcher of
Yeah.
with the powdered formula. So you make a whole day's worth of formula, have it in a
Yep.
pitcher, it's in the fridge, so you can just pull from that for the day, but only for that day.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that has a really good, I think Dr. Brown's is the only one that has it, but it has like a little pump so you can, like, before you pour it into a bottle, it kind of like turns everything around. So everything's really good and mixed.
Sweet. Oh, so there's a
Um,
specific pitcher for this, the Dr. Brown's version. Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
And there may be other brands, but that's the only one that I've seen because it has that little turny thing inside that mix it all up with.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the baby brezas that you can get. They're like, Keurigs for formula. And you put the formula in, each one has a setting. So you put in which type of formula you're using. You put your pre-boiled formula or pre-boiled water in the back, press your button for how many ounces you want, and it comes out magic temperature for baby.
Oh my God.
In the right
What?
amount.
I love
Yes.
that. I love that. Finally, somebody took that. What a great idea.
It's magic. Honestly, it's
Yeah.
great. It's a little loud, like it's like you're, making an espresso, so it's a little bit loud.
Okay.
But it's magic. Like, there's no thought to it. It's just,
A
it's
Keurig for
done.
formula, like you said.
A
That's
Keurig for
genius.
formula. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So that's kind of the other thing with the powdered formula is, these kind of extra little gadgets take the mind out of it. It's quite easy. And especially at like 3 o'clock in the morning when you're really, really tired, you don't have to like turn on lights and all these kinds of things to see how much formula you're putting in. It's just press a button and it's good and done.
That's it. So, and you've already mentioned some really fantastic time-saving ways to do that because you don't want to be at 1 a.m. Your newborn is already starving, wish they had some already in them, and now you have to boil the water and cool it down and do all the things. So, prepping some of this stuff in advance is super
Yeah.
helpful. Does it matter, Shandelle, if we're using the microwave to heat things up, or does this all need to be done on the stove? Like, is there any difference there?
So when you're heating a bottle, never use the microwave just because it can get really like spotty for what parts of
Hot
the milk
spots.
was heated.
Yeah,
Hot
yeah,
spots,
yeah.
exactly. So we never recommend using the microwave. Um, Never recommend boiling water and putting it on the stove and doing that. Hot tap water in a cup, boiling water from the kettle and then put it in a cup. Doing it that way, that's kind of the best ways. Again, gadget wise, you can always buy a bottle warmer. And, usually they're, almost like a thermos type thing. Pour a couple of mils of water in it. Each one is different. Turn it on for, depending on how many ounces of milk you have in it, you turn the dial. And, usually within 30 to 60 seconds, it's heated up and ready to go.
Nice. So we
Yeah.
have bottle warmers and the Brezza and things, which are very convenient, so help with the convenience type, but not
Yeah,
necessary. Um,
exactly.
but though, yeah, that's all good to know. Interesting. Um, what about when it comes to we want to make sure that the preparation of this is safe. So you already talked about some of those things as well. I'm curious about the pre-boiled water
Yep.
versus distilled water. Is that the same? Can you use one or the other?
So that's kind of up in the air depending on who you talk to. The issue with the distilled water is that once it's open, you can't guarantee that it's bacteria free and safe once it's open and kind of thing, air gets added and all those things. So,
Mm-hmm.
like a small bottle of distilled water, like bottled
That you're
water,
going to use
that's
all of or most of. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, especially
Okay.
within 24 hours, great. Some people buy those big, huge jugs, with the big handle on it that they buy at the grocery store, the distilled water. It's not kind of, you're probably not going to use it all up by the time you can guarantee that it stays safe.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why kind of the smaller bottles are always better.
So time is important. Also, if your
Yep.
little one drinks from the bottle, and this is the same case for breast milk and formula,
Yeah,
I believe, is that you want to, if there's any milk left in the bottle after the feeding, you can only reuse it if it's been within an hour or something. Is that
that's right.
right?
Yep,
Otherwise, we're
60 minutes.
throwing it out because just like the saliva from our mouth, the air, like could get some bacteria showing up in there. So
Exactly.
that's been my understanding of the powdered formula and how typically, at least in the past anyway, I know that that's not generally recommended, or we know it's not recommended for all babies, like you said, immune compromised or preterm babies. But for a lot of healthy term babies, you can use that right from the gate, but you do want to be particularly cautious about the preparation of that. So just following the guidelines of preparing it properly with the proper water and stuff is really all you need to think about, right?
That and also making sure that your bottles are sterilized. And so, especially with formula, you want to make sure that the nipples, the part that the nipples fit into and screw onto the bottle, and the bottles themselves have all been sterilized. So that's the other thing is that you want to make sure that all equipment used, your hands are really washed before you start putting the nipples into the bottles and all those kinds of things. So, that's the other piece with bottle prep too.
Okay, cool. Good to know. Now I want to chat about, because there are lots of people, lots of breastfeeding women, chest feeding people, let's say, who either intentionally start out with breastfeeding or maybe want to do all the breastfeeding, but now we are either needing to supplement or wanting to supplement with formula. I find there can be a lot of questions around going from breast milk to formula, and how do we know amounts, and how do we know, is it okay, like, can you talk us through, I'm guessing, I'm assuming you've worked with families that have done the combo feeding or have maybe switched from breastfeeding to formula and what that's kind of been like.
Yeah. So it really, each family is completely different, and why they're doing it is completely different. For some people, it's about topping up because maybe baby's not gaining enough weight and as to what the doctors want. Um, And so, that's going to look different. For those people, it may be okay, just give your baby 10 to 15 mils after a breastfeed, just to kind of top that up, and gradually you're going to decrease. If it means people are, for different reasons they want to be able to breastfeed and then have a break, be able to sleep through the night, be able to go to the movies or go to the grocery store. And so they want to be able to do both. Or maybe somebody is switching completely to formula from breastfeeding. And so some of the things to look out for is when you transition baby, is if you can mix formula and breast milk together in a bottle. So if you have some pumped breast milk, mix that, because that will slowly transition baby's belly to getting used to having formula. Because most babies do have a bit of an adjustment with their belly and they get like extra gassy and uncomfortable. So if you can mix and do like a 50-50, maybe, gradually increase it 70-30, those kinds of things. That's always a good tip that I find. And then just knowing that not all babies love all formulas. And so it may take a little bit of time for your baby's body to adjust. It may take, a couple of days for you to kind of get a baby who's feeling comfortable again. So just having patience with that. And then usually after a week or so, if your baby is not having a good time, their belly's really upset, it may mean that you have to switch and look at something that's a little bit gentler on their belly, maybe has less iron, because most formulas have like a whole ton of iron in them, just so that by the time the baby passes it through their system, they've absorbed the amount that they need to. So it may mean that you need a gentler formula that has less iron in it. You can get ones that have less or no lactose. So it's just kind of a balance of watching your baby and listening to your baby to see how they're adjusting to that switch with formula. And then for the amounts, it's really hard because people who breastfeed don't know how much their baby is getting. You're just trusting wet diapers and poopy diapers and weight gain and all those things. So there's lots of great resources about how much mils in a bottle your baby should be getting based on their age. I always go to the canada.ca website. They have such great information, and it's really based on what the guidelines are in Canada. And so that's what I always refer to for, changes of, what formulas is kind of how they're prepared and those kinds of things. And so they have great info there too about what ages are babies increasing their formula mils and those kinds of things.
Beautiful. I'll be sure to link to that in the show notes. And also the IWK puts out, our local hospital here puts out a little document on formula. I say little, there's quite a bit in there. It's not necessarily some light reading, but it really kind of goes through a lot of these things, and it's a good reference tool. This is definitely a question that I've gotten asked a lot as well, though I'm not a lactation consultant, but I do talk about feedings a lot with families. It is that amounts. And what we do talk about with bottle feeding, whether that's pumped breast milk or formula, is this paced bottle feeding, right? How you're positioning baby and the bottle for them to drink it so that we avoid things like overfeeding. You can kind of get a good idea of what amounts are good for them because they'll more likely stop when they're full versus, the bottle's empty, so we're done eating.
Yeah.
So is that something that you coach parents through, Shandelle, is that paced bottle feeding? They're a little bit more upright, right?
Yeah. And a lot of times I'm talking to partners about this because they're the ones usually who are, the ones feeding the baby with a bottle, just so that, if the baby is transitioning, they're not smelling the milk from the mom. So a lot of times it is the partner that I'm chatting with. So we talk about kind of, how to sit baby a little bit more upright and holding the bottle parallel to the floor so that they can take the milk that they need. The other position that works really great is if you sit on the couch, put your knees up, kind of at an incline to your body, sit baby in there, but on their side. And then the bottle kind of sits on the side. They're sucking this way. And then again, they can take it as they need it. And it's a little bit more comfortable for the person giving the bottle to be a little bit more relaxed, a little bit easier to hold baby and kind of watch what their cues are doing too. But the pace bottle feeding is great for how much they're taking in so that they can dictate that, the baby, but also for gas. When, the milk isn't just kind of pouring in their mouth, they're able to kind of control the flow, which then they're not taking in as much air when they're drinking too. So it's kind of, killing two birds with one stone when you do pace bottle feeding.
Absolutely. I find that's the first question that I get when I talk about paced bottle feeding in prenatal classes. Won't they get more gas that way? Because we see that, oh, they could be taking in more
Right.
air with it. But actually, it's the other way around. If it's just chug, 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 they're not able to manage it as well. And that's when we get the gas.
That's right. And I always tell people, like, keep an eye on your baby, like watch what the bottle is doing. And obviously if there's no milk in the tip of the nipple, then yep, tilt it up a little bit.
Tilted a little. Yeah.
But it's more about like not having it full so that the baby, isn't getting, I almost call it like waterboarding all the time, so they can't like, they're not just gulping and they can't control it. They're just little beings at this point. So, the pace bottle feeding is great for both of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree. Um, could we just chat for a second? Because we just touched on this earlier. I just kind of wanted to wrap up with this conversation around the variation in families choosing to use formula, whether primarily or in addition to breastfeeding, and then families who feel like or actually have to switch to formula when it's not necessarily their choice or their preferred
Mhm.
method of feeding baby. Um, the impact that can have on a family, particularly a mom who's breastfeeding, on her mental health. As sometimes, whether it's maybe somebody choosing to give their baby formula or in addition to, and maybe the impact of that is some shame in not breastfeeding, just as one example. And then on the flip side, parents and moms who feel like, or they have to top up or they have to give their babies formula, but they were really hoping to or planning to exclusively breastfeed, and the impacts that has on their own mental health, their own guilty feelings. Have you come across any of this? Is this ringing a bell with any of the families you've worked with? And do you have any kind of suggestions or tips or words of wisdom in that realm of like, we tend to think about really what's best for baby. We say fed is best, but fed is actually a need.
Yeah.
So however you do that is best. But what really is best, I feel, is a parent's mental health. And that's what's going to have a healthy baby. So I was just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit in your experience.
Yeah, and I have the same thoughts as you, is that like whatever you need to do to be the best parent that you can be, that's the decisions that you need to look at. And so, I
Mm-hmm.
think about one client in particular that I have who really didn't want to bottle feed. She had a negative experience with her first, in that she couldn't completely breastfeed. There were some anatomy issues and some things going on. And so she set herself up for great things this time. Had all the, the supplements and had, the little tools like silverettes and things like that she, could help. And this time, the same thing happened. And so for her, it was a big, huge disappointment. And, I see that. And she knew she made the best decision for her was to stop trying to breastfeed, because it just wasn't working for them, and to bottle feed. But everything she sees online, from the IWK posting things about breastfeeding to, what's in the books that are sent home from the IWK, is a trigger for her. Um,
Mm.
and it's really, really hard because it's something that she desperately wanted. And it's quite difficult. We have great counselors within, HRM, and I'm sure, whoever's listening, wherever they are, there's some great counselors too. But there's a shortage and people can't get in to see these people all the time. And so for me as a doula, whether it's a birth client or a postpartum client, it's really about like talking to them and, encouraging them and just letting them know, you are doing the best thing for you and for you being a parent. And if they're still willing to give it a go, then what do we need to do? What resources do you need that we can try to keep feeding going? And how does that look? And what supports do you need? So, I think that that's something though that people take with them for a long time. If they were kind of, I want to say, forced or needed to change to bottle feeding after they didn't want to. Um, and then the flip side is the people who want to bottle feed, and that could be anything from they just want to formula feed and don't want to breastfeed, to anatomy issues, to sexual assault. It could be anything. And society, the way that is now, is like, oh, breast is best. Let's post pictures of Rihanna and how, superstars are breastfeeding their baby. And then people see it, and there is a little bit of a stigma to people who decide to bottle feed, or to formula feed. And I think that that's tough too. So I think as support people who, chat with pregnant people and postpartum people all the time, we may have our biases on what feeding is best. Like, I think we all have biases on everything in the birth world and everything in life. But, if we truly want to support people, it's kind of keeping those biases aside and just supporting people where they are so that they have somebody who acknowledges that they've made the choice. They're not doing this out of like, oh, I'm just going to bottle feed. They've done the research. They know what's out there. They know the pros and the cons. We have to just take them at their word that this is the choice that they've made, and they've done it in informed consent, and just support them in that. And then the flip side is those people who get the information at the IWK of like, breast is best, and then they give formula because maybe baby's not gaining weight or enough weight, which isn't necessarily evidence-based either.
Right. Making you feel inadequate. You're not enough. So here's something else to help.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then it may not help because it's maybe going to make baby super gassy and add an extra step to your feeding journey that maybe now you're triple feeding, which is breastfeeding, then pumping, then bottle feeding.
You're spending your whole day doing
whole
that.
day.
It's so much work.
Yep. And then you have to sterilize all these things. So that's extra. And then, there's some information that's sent home from the IWK as well in one of those books that says, if you decide to give your baby formula, having 2 drinks and breastfeeding your baby is better than formula. And so that's not a great thing to have either. So, it's kind of, you need to shut out everything and have the right supports behind you who are going to support you no matter what decision that is, give you the evidence-based information. And whether that's evidence-based on formula versus breast, whether that's about topping up, whether that's about how much, it's really just about us as support people, supporting people where they're at in their journey.
Yeah, 100%. You made such great points in there. I think really the biggest one that still sticks out at me is like, we don't know everybody's background, and it's not even our business.
Yeah.
So we all have to make choices that maybe we would prefer not to have had to make or whatever, but like that's their own choice, and we just need to respect that and help them wherever they're at. So really, all of this is tying into the whole reason of having this podcast episode and having you here, Shandelle, is so that people know that there is a bit of information and resources and support where they can get that from this episode, the links that we're going to put in the show notes for additional learning and information, and knowing that there's people out there like yourself, other lactation consultants, doulas that can help support and maybe helps families navigate where they can go next or where they can get that support. So very much appreciated.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we maybe didn't touch on, or anything else you wanted to make sure that we talked about in this vein? Really, it was I feel like we went full circle.
I don't think so. I think it's really just find the information. It is out there. Make sure it's legitimate websites that you're going to, and not kind of like Baby Center and you're getting all kinds of other parent information. And
we don't need mommy blogs. No thanks.
No, not those.
Not for this.
No. So find the reputable resources. Find the people that you that you trust, and go from there when you need to find the information.
And like most of everything else, it can be overwhelming where we feel like, there's all these different kinds, there's all these different brands, there's this, there's that. So that all the more importance of finding the right resources, the right people you can ask. And that's why I always feel like and I know you're like this too, Shandelle, that like, you don't necessarily have to hire somebody to do this, but like I invite those that, you know, in prenatal class, I'm like, hey guys, if you're out there looking for a resource or wondering about something, like, please feel free to ask. And if I don't know who's doing it, I actually will probably want to find out too. So
Yeah.
all of us in this world, I feel like we just understand that we're not the answer to everybody, but we can help people navigate this because it is really hard to do. So thank you. Thank you.
100%.
Thank you so much
You're
for this
welcome.
conversation. And I will definitely link to where people can find you. But can you tell us where people can find you online or wherever?
Absolutely. So my business is Blossom and Birth. So Google on the Nova Scotia Doula Association website, but just www.blossomandbirth.ca, and that's where you can find me.
Beautiful. We'll link to that too. Thanks so much, Shandelle. It was great to talk
You're
to you
welcome.
today.
Have a great day.
You too. If you're looking for more information or support along your parenting journey, check out birthbabysleep.ca. That's where you're going to find prenatal classes, postpartum and new baby resources, and sleep support during the childhood years. You can now join our Bringing Up Baby community membership as well, which has tons of additional benefits to helping you through all kinds of sleep challenges and transitions, navigating the transition to solid foods, and even your transition through early parenthood. If you have any questions, just send them my way. Lastly, but certainly not least, if you got something out of this episode or our show in general, leaving a rating or a quick review goes a really long way to helping others find us. So please consider leaving one. That's all for now. I'm Ashley Cooley, and we'll see you back here next time.